So here is the main interface for Aquarius Connect. Like Aquarius Time Series, it's just it's a web application, and instead of placing Aquarius at the end, we type in AQ Connect. This is the main entry into the Aquarius Connect interface. If you have not logged in before, you will be asked to log in, and again, it is also the with the username admin and a password admin. A very important feature to be aware of is the help screen. Click on the question mark up here, and it will bring you to a very, very important documentation for doing any kind of configuration and any kind of help with Aquarius Connect. So very briefly, a quick overview is under the Getting Started. Aquarius Connect represents this middle piece where we are bringing in data from other sources, and those sources can be text files, XML, some other kinds of files that you may not be familiar with, which are from Canada and other organizations, and databases. This is what we will be demonstrating, or I will be demonstrating today, pulling in data from a database. Within Aquarius Connect, we can pull the data out and transform it, and then we export to our destination. And the destination in this case will be Aquarius Time Series. From the main page, you can see the various components of Aquarius Connect. We've got connectors. That is the key element that brings data from other systems, transforms them, and moves them into Aquarius. We'll be referencing this throughout this video. Locations represent the location of your data and where they will go into a location in Aquarius. Scheduling, we can schedule how often the extraction of the data and importing of the data will occur. And then down here are the types of ways that one can extract data, different drivers that will show us. So for example, it's just jumped me to the extraction driver, and here are the others: connection driver and export driver. I'll just go back so it's less confusing. So for the extraction drivers, here's what we have, meaning what is Aquarius Connect able to pull data from? So we have currently configured it can pull data from a database, a text file, or an XML file. For the inbound connection drivers, this is what kinds of systems can Aquarius Connect connect to. So we can pull from a database, the file system, FTP, or HTTP. Export driver is where can Aquarius Connect push data to, and currently it can only do this to an Aquarius Time Series server. In the future, perhaps there will be other destinations that will be added to the software, other types of programs or applications. So when you come into an Aquarius Connect system that is configured, you will see that everything revolves around a location. So as I expand the location, you'll see I have one location configured called Sutani. And perhaps I've misnamed that. It should be an N, I believe, instead of an M, but that's just in display. So when I click on Sutami, it shows me that there's one connector configured, and that one connector has one rule, which is pulling in water level. Each of these has configuration information related to it. So let me first click on the upper level of the location itself. When I click on that, there is some metadata about the location. Its name, identifier, its name, UTC offset, its location, and description. And this location has a connector that has been configured for it down here, which is shown. The connector is what we will be coming back to time and time again. and it is the component of AQUARIUS Connect that links the source data to the transforming of that data to where it's going to go in the AQUARIUS system. So if you're ever confused as to what the configuration is for a particular station, if you go to the connector, you will see a screen like this, which has all of your key information. So for this location in particular, Sutami, we see that the connection driver, we have a connection driver. This is the part that says where should it connect to get the data. In this case, it will be your Oracle system, and I will show you how that is configured in a moment. Another part is the extraction. So once you're connected to the system, be it Oracle in this case, how can it extract that data from that system, from that connection? Once those have been configured, you create rules to say, well, I need to put that data somewhere into the AQUARIUS server. So that is done by configuring rules and adding those rules here. So let's look at each of these individually. So for this example, the connection driver, if I see how that has been configured, I can just click on the default rule. Well, I'll click here, configure rule. And we will see now this is the information about how to connect to your Oracle system. If this was a brand new rule that had this connection had not been configured yet, these would all be blank and you would have the option to choose your connection drivers. So in this case, we are saying it's a database connection. One can use other presets if they have them configured, or just choose the default. All of these different pieces have a default setting, but by setting a rule profile, it allows you to save some commonly selected parameters. But using the default is fine. So in this case, we're connecting to a database system through ODBC. You have the option also for SQL Server, but because we're Oracle, we're choosing ODBC. And to do that, you need to create a DSN connection on your local machine. And I've created one called ORCL main PGT. And as a probably a refresher for most of you, this data set is set within the control panel, administrative tools, and the data access. So here's the connection information for your system. Click that and test. Okay, you see we can connect to the system. So I will cancel out of that piece the connection information that we had here. Now let's go over and have a look at how one extracts that data from the connection. So here we are in the extraction rule, and you'll see we're running a query against that database connection. We're pulling back data from the tbl_wl_sutami. We need to specify what parts of the query represent certain elements that the AQUARIUS Connect needs to know. So it's saying, what is our timestamp column? Well, that is the first column, and that's called date time. What is the column that has the value that we want to extract? And that is the TMA column. That's for water level. And there's some other advanced features down here that you can read about in the help manual. But for basic ingestion, we don't need to worry about those. I will cancel this and go back to the connector screen. I'll scroll down, and now that we have a connection to the database, Now we know what data to extract from the database. We need to tell AQUARIUS Connect what to do with that data. So here now we'll click on the Edit Data Rules, Edit Data Set Rules. So we have one data set rule called water level. If I click on this, you'll see it will give me the details about this data set rule. In this case, it's telling us, or we are telling it, to look at the first column of that query, the first value column of that query, which was the TMA column, the water level, and just give it a name. This can be anything that you like, but it's good to make it obvious. Enable it. So once you have that, once AQUARIUS Connect has that data, send it now under export rules. We need to look at the export rule that's been configured. Send it to the AQUARIUS system using the AQUARIUS driver and fill out some details where it should go exactly. So we are telling it that it is stage data, and do note this is the parameter within AQUARIUS, and this is case sensitive. So if this will change in a future release, very likely, but it is case sensitive. So it must have for stage an uppercase S. Lowercase will give you an error. So this is saying that it's going to go into AQUARIUS time series as the parameter of stage. It's going to go to a data set that has a label called WL, and it's going to go into the location called Sutami. So these three pieces are all, if we go back now to AQUARIUS time series, we'll see that we are in the location Sutami. The parameter is stage, and the label is water level. So if I go back now to AQUARIUS Connect, you can see that these all match what we just saw in AQUARIUS time series. And you can do other advanced settings down here if you like, but for the time being, we're happy with how that's configured. So once one comes in here and creates it, they would typically save it. I will just click cancel, and it will now show down below what we just configured. So this information now is ready to extract data. This connector is ready to run and pull data from Oracle, parse that data, and put it into AQUARIUS according to this rule. So to run this and see if it's functioning as we expect, we click on the Run connector. But before I do that, I'm going to go to the event log and make sure that it look at the last time that this was run. So then I'll know that the new entries I enter it'll be clear to differentiate. So this last ran at 10:10. I'm just going to remember that, and it exported 182 points. Okay, so now I will go back to this one, and I will click Run the connector. It tells me up here that it is enqueued the connector. It's in the queue to be run, but it runs very quickly. I'll go over to the event log, and let's see what we have. Let's scroll down. And you can see that it has run, look at 10:26 is the time that it ran. I'll just go to where that 10:26 stops. We'll see. Okay, so it started here, started running the connector. And if there were any errors along the way, we would see that here under the event detail. But as I scroll up, you see it's pulling the data. It found 182 points. And just various other information indicating that there was success and that it extracted it. So now if there was new data that came in fact, one brief comment here. This particular query, I'm going to go back and have a look at that query one more time so we can talk about the this particular query, you'll note, is running for those parameters that we've identified, but it's also only pulling back the most recent 7 days of data. So when you see in the event log that it indicated that there was 182, I believe, 182 entries, that's saying over the last 7 days. Now there will be a feature that currently is currently not functioning in AQUARIUS Connect that will look at the last time that the system was run, the last valid point, and it will only bring back data after that point. So look for that feature in a subsequent release. So over here in AQUARIUS time series, if we open up this data, again back in data correction, we would see any new data that would appear that we have just ingested from AQ Connect. That will show at the bottom. So if you recall, it depends on when it looks like we do have one new point here. I don't think this one was here before. And I'll just look at the entire time series. There we go. Now, one tip I would like to give you that I have found is very handy when you are configuring a connector for the first time and you run it and everything seems to look okay in your log file, but there's no data, the data does not seem to be appending to the AQUARIUS time series. This can be a caching issue of the data set in AQUARIUS Connect. The developers will adjust this, but if you see that kind of behavior where everything looks like you've got it configured correctly, what you should do is go into this configure state button, and this maintains the state of the last extraction time and various other information, and just reset it. So click reset state and then save, and that clears the cache of information that might be being held by AQ Connect, so it will get a fresh copy and so forth. This can also occur if you delete one of your data sets from AQUARIUS time series and then recreate it with the same name, but internally it has a different identifier. So then that cached information over in AQUARIUS Connect is actually no longer valid. So in that case, you want to go in and clear the state like I just showed you, but also clear the state of the data set itself from the extraction rule. So let me show you that again. So here we are in the data set rule. I'm going to expand that data set rule and then expand, this was collapsed here, expand the export rule. And once you've done so, you can see that there's a configure state button, and just do the same. Reset the state and then save. I'll cancel that, but I want to show you once more what is in that state value, what gets captured. So you can see that it's got information for this data set, for this rule, when it was last run, the date, the time, how many points were exported, and various other information that is that can be, I think, well, referenced and used. So it's a good idea to clear that if you're seeing unusual or unexpected behavior. So that is how one station is currently configured to get water level data from your Oracle system into AQUARIUS. One thing I didn't show is that this is on a schedule, and you can see by this connector, we'll see that it references a schedule right here under schedules, hourly water level real-time update. Perhaps that's not the most appropriate name, does say water level. Maybe you want to name it just hourly real-time update. But to get information, when you configure the connector, when you're creating it, you can edit and add any kind of schedule that you like. But first you need to configure that schedule, and that configuration is done under the Schedules tab. So here we have one schedule. Let's see how that's configured. Similar to other Windows schedulers that you've probably seen, when it should be triggered, what is the step, from time, to time, etc. So this one will run every hour starting at 10 minutes past midnight until midnight. And it will run from the beginning of time until the end of time. Let's hope our software is around that long. If one wanted to add other triggers, they could do so, or if they wanted to add a completely separate schedule, just click on Create Schedule, give it a name and description, and then add those triggers. And depending on what you choose, if you want it to run monthly, you will be presented with different information. There's also the event log, which will show you the events of the entire system, not just on specific connectors. So you can see when it last ran, which was a few moments ago. And you can set up some user accounts and other things. So that is showing one particular location, the Sutami location for water level. The next step I'd like to do is to create all of this from scratch for a brand new location. So I'm going to go now back to Aquarius web portal, the Aquarius time series, and create a new location with a new water level data set, and then create the Aquarius Connect configuration so that it pulls data from the table in your Oracle system. I can figure out, if I go back to here, I have Oracle's SQL Developer, and the one that I showed you was for WL Sutami. So if I execute that query, you see it pulls back that data for Sutami. But the one I want to configure now is for Gadang. That's this one here. Now let's see what that data looks like. I'll just execute that highlighted script. And we see that it has data also from the beginning of 2018, it looks like, and maybe it was farther back, but this is real-time data as well. Looks like it's hourly data coming in. Okay, so now let's configure this Aquarius time series and Aquarius Connect to pull in data for this one. So I'm going to go back to Aquarius over here, and you'll see down at the bottom we have a new location. I'm going to wait for that to load, give it a location identifier name, location identifier and a name. Location identifier must be unique in the entire system. Gadang can be anything, any free-form entry, but in this case I'll just leave them the same. You can set other metadata here, the type of station, etc. I'm not sure exactly where the station is, but a quick Google search led me to a location in Indonesia, in Sumatra, I believe, or perhaps it was Java, called Gadang, but it's easy to change that at any point. I'll put in the lats and longs. We can leave the elevation blank. And I will click Save. So it tells us that it's been saved successfully. Great. Now I'm going to close the location manager and go back over to our main Springboard interface, and I'll start typing. As I type, you see Gadang now appears. I'll select that, and now it's showing us the two locations, data sets for two locations. We currently do not have any data sets for Gadang, and when I remove the Sutami data sets, you'll see now it shows us that there are none. To create a data set, click on the little hamburger menu, the three lines, and choose New Basic Time Series. So this we can the label can be any text that you like. You can call it, in this case, we'll just call it WL for water level. It's going to be called, in Aquarius, for water level, it's called stage. So I'll select that, where the units of measurement are in meters. Measurement method, if you have certain kinds of a method that's being used, you can record that here. I don't know your system, so I'll just leave it as none. Interpolation type, this is instantaneous data. We have other options here, so please read in the Aquarius help what those other kinds of data types of data interpolation types are, and you can get that information from the help question mark up here. That will take you to the help guide. The data gap tolerance for, it looks like your data is hourly, so I'm going to set this to just a little bit larger than an hourly value, so call it 61. So if there's data that's missing, it will, anything greater than a 61-minute space between them will indicate as a gap. The UTC offset, I believe, is +7, I think. I hope I'm correct on that, for your local time zone. And then we click Save. And it tells us that the time series was created, and it shows it, and there will be no data in it. So now we have a place where our data can go. So everything is done now, what needs to be done for on the Aquarius time series end. Now we need to go to Aquarius Connect and configure a new location and a connector. So it will pull data from Oracle, from that table in Oracle, to get it into Aquarius. So I will click, here I am in Aquarius Connect. I clicked on locations, and I'll create a new location. So I will call this Gadang. I think I can still copy that. Oh, no. Gadang. I'll leave these other things blank. It's not required, and I'll click Save. The next step is I will now go back into that location and create a connector. So we can then configure how it's going to get its, where it's going to get its data, how it will extract that data once it knows where to get it, and where to put that data. So we can just leave that name as connector. We can add that to the other schedule as well, which will run hourly. So we'll give it that schedule. We will enable it. It's for a single location, and that location is Gadang. I will save, and next you see we're working through a wizard. We've done this step, now we're on the extraction rule step, followed by soon the connection rule and the data set rules. So how are we going to pull that data out? Well, we know it's going to come from a database, so we're going to use the database extraction driver. And what rule profile? Well, we only have the default configured, but if you had many different databases that you were connecting to, you would consider creating different rule profiles, and that will save you from typing in extra content down here. So now we have to give it a query. Well, I'm going to copy the other query that I have and just change the table that it's going to be pulling it from. So I will paste in that query here, and in this case it's going to be called Gadang, and everything else will remain the same, but let's just confirm that. I'm going to copy that query and go back to SQL Developer. Make sure that I have that query correct. It looks like it runs just fine. So in this case, again, it's pulling back the last 7 days. However, since this is the first time that we've run this, we want more than the last 7 days. So let's just remove that condition and run, and we'll copy that. So we're going to get all of the data for the first time, and then once it's run, we can add in that condition for performance reasons. So I'm just going to replace that. Okay. Now, which is the timestamp column? It is as before, date time. What is the value column? As before, TMA. And we don't need to set those other ones. So I'll click Save and go to the next step. The next step is where is it going to connect to get this data? Let's choose Database. And what is the rule? Well, it's the one that we've already configured. This is the one that connects, that uses the local DSN connecting to the Oracle system. You see, as soon as I've selected default, it pulls up that local DSN. So that's great. And I'll click Save. And now we are in the last step of configuring how to process that data, or how to parse that data and put it into Aquarius. So it's the first column that we are interested in from that query. That's not a date time column, which is the one for TMA. We'll call that 1. We'll put in water level. We'll enable it. So now that's parsed it, that's grabbed the data from this step, but now we have to say, where do we want to export that data to? Well, we only have one choice for one export driver currently in AQUARIUS Connect. It can only export to an Aquarius system, so we'll need to choose that. What profile should we run? Well, let's just leave it. We haven't configured any profiles, so we'll leave it with the default profile, which means we'll be able to add in every field below. I will enable that. And again, we'll go through and fill out these fields. So because it's water level, that is stage. Time series label, we called it WL. So just to confirm that, well, we'll confirm that in a moment. For some reason, this is checked. This should not be checked, so it does not let me enter it. But I'll just simply uncheck that and enter in Gedang. Now I want to look at these 3 values and make sure I have that correct over from Aquarius time series. So the name of the location is Gedang, its parameter stage, its label is water level. Go back to Aquarius Connect. Name of the location, the label, the parameter. That is correct. It looks good. Okay, and I will save. So now you'll see over on our left we have a new location that we've created, Gedang. It has a connector and it's pulling in water level. So we're looking now at the connector that we just configured. This is where all of our information that we need to extract the data should be located. So if we ever have any questions or problems, we always come back to the connector and look at each component that we have configured to see if we have missed something. So I'm pretty confident about how this is set up. If we look at the rule for what it's connecting to, we see it's using the DSN. That's great. That's correct. Let's see how it's extracting the data. It's using this query. Oh, it has. Oh, that's good. I thought I removed that, but I have commented it out. So hopefully, when a query is copied like that, it will not execute that where clause, but we'll find out. We will see by looking at the log file. Cancel that. And then the rules for grabbing water level. So it looks good, and it's going to put it into these into the stage parameter, one labeled water level for Gedang. That all looks great. So let's run this one. I'm going to click Run Connector. You'll see it says it's in the queue to run. We'll go over now. This is going to bring in much more data if that thing that we removed the where clause. So let's see how many points it's going to bring in, I see, it's going to bring in 43,179 points. And let's see if it's run. Okay, I think it's still processing, I believe. A quick way to refresh the log is you can click there, but this, yeah, okay, that does. This is actual link. It doesn't look like a link, but it does. So here it tells us that it's completed the execution and it exported 43,179 points. That sounds great. No errors whatsoever. We will go over to Aquarius, and now let's open up and have a look. Let me just refresh the screen to illustrate something. Note this date. This is when we created it. It says 10:40, so that was 10 minutes ago. This will show us when this data set has been updated. So if it had received any new data, this will show when that data was last received. So you'll see it's 10:49, and that was 2 minutes ago when the export finished, I suppose. So let's have a look at that data and see if it's what we expect. It's opening up another correction tool. And there we go. So this data looks quite a bit different from the other one, but let's get the whole, there we go. There's some quite erratic values. You can zoom in and get a sense of what's going on a little bit. So on December, looks like late December 7th, 2013, there was some sort of some sort of higher water event. And let's go down and to the very bottom of our field of all of our data to see the last point that was ingested, which looks like it was at midnight on October 12th, 385. Note this over here, the data gaps tab. If I click here, it will show us where we are missing data. And in this column, make some more space. In this column here, the hours column, it will show us the size of the gap where data is missing. So here we see it says 6. If you double click it, it will take us to the data set where that's missing. So we see there's no data on December 2012 from on the 24th at, if I hover over that here, a quick way is just to right click on your mouse. It will zoom out in pieces. So you can see, well, if you right click on any point, it should give a pop-up. Well, maybe not in this case. Oh, there we go. I want it to pop up here. Oh. Let's not concern ourselves with that one, but here it tells us that's from, there's a gap on December 24th at 2300 until the 25th at 0500. And looks like there's some other gaps here as well. So if you go back to the time series grid, it also shows these as gaps. But it's a very handy way to quickly see where you're missing data. Just remember this, the data gaps tab. So you can see there's quite a few gaps in this particular data set. You can also order to see what the largest gap is. I'll just click that again. And you see there's some that are quite large. 97 hours in this case. Where was that? Looks like in August of last year, 97 hours, several days of data that was missing. Now remember, the query that we created was bringing back all of the data for Gadang. We don't want it to run every time and bring back all of the data. We only want it to bring back the most recent data. So now I'm going to uncomment that where clause. So now it will only bring back the last 7 days of data. And if data is already in the system, that's okay. Aquarius will not overwrite it with the new data unless you want it to. And that can be configured in another part of the software. So in the export piece. and I will show you that briefly. But now I'm going to save this after uncommenting the where clause, so it will only bring back the last 7 days of data. And let's just run that to show how that is indeed the case. So I'm going to run that query again, or that connector again. I will go to the event log, scroll down, and now you see it's only pulling back 180 points, not 43,000. That represents the last 7 days of data. If you actually did want new data that is already in the system to be overwritten, or data that's in the system to be overwritten by new data coming in, then you need to go and adjust your export rule. So we go to the dataset rule under export rules that we've configured, and here is where you can set those types of settings. So you'll see the write mode. Currently it is append without overwrite. Any data overlapping existing data is discarded before writing. So let's see what those other options are. We can append with overwrite, so any data after the start of the new data will be deleted before writing the new data, or we can overwrite. So if you did want it to, if you wanted to change any of these, notice I can't click on it, but that's because it's inheriting it from the default profile. I can uncheck that. There we go. Oop. And now it will let me select that. So then if I run this connector again, it's going to get those last 7 days of data and overwrite the current last 7 days of data that are in the system. For the most part, we recommend this setup for maximum performance. Now I want to show another element, something a little bit more advanced, as one of the last topics to cover. What if the scenario is that your query has other information that you want to capture? So perhaps it's not only water level, but perhaps it's discharge, water temperature, salinity, various things like that, all from the same query. Currently, that's not possible to get more in this format, to get more than one to have more than one value column. So in this case, we're getting just solely water level. However, with some creative uses of SQL and in this query, we can accomplish that within the single connector. So let's do that with this station Sutami. When we look at the data, actually, let's do on Gedang. I think that's a better example because there's more data. So when I run this query here for let's see what is in the station, the location Gedang. So it looks like we have water level and discharge and some other parameters. But let's say we want to get water level and discharge data into Aquarius. How do we do that? Okay, so I'm going to go into the connector for Gedang. Always go back to the connector if you're wondering where to start the configuration. And we don't need to adjust this one because this is just where it's connecting to, and we know that's going to your Oracle system. The database extraction is where the query is built, so let's change that query somewhat. So instead of using this query, I'm going to bring up Notepad. That might be easier to work with. Let's see. We are going to use this query, and it's standard SQL except for this feature here, this token. This is an Aquarius Connect token, dataset ID. And what that is a simple replacement that AQUARIUS Connect, when it runs this query, it looks for this dataset ID term and will replace it for each of the rules that are configured in here with the value that I'll show you. It's probably easier to show with this value, the data set identifier. So in this case, for water level, it's 1. And let's go back to the query. So that means it's going to replace 1 for this data set ID. So it will be select the date and time from your database and the case, being using a case in SQL. When that case is 1, so it'll just be, it will replace it and run this query just like this. When the case is 1, so then pull it from the TMA column of your data set, of your query. If it's not that, then pull it from a column called discharge inflow. And I believe that's not the correct column in this case. Let's go back to the query and see, no, it's called discharge. So I'm going to make sure that that says discharge in this query. So really it's just running potentially two different queries, but from the same query. It's either going to be pulling out the date, time, and TMA. So select from, or it's going to be pulling out discharge. So either one of these two data extractions are going to occur, depending on what that substitution ends up being. So let me show you how that's done. So we're going to go to make sure I'm in the right connector, which I am. I'm going to replace that query with this one. Make sure it's got everything correct there. Okay, that looks good. And now it's going to be calling it value. That's what this second column is going to be called. TMA, it's not going to call it TMA, it's going to be calling it value. Discharge, it's going to call it value. So that means on our value column, we need to change that to value. That is looking good. I will save this. And this is now almost configured. We'll now create another data set rule to connect. So currently we're only pulling in the water level, but now we want to put it into a discharge data set. We don't actually have one yet, so let's make sure we go and create one for Gadang. And I will do what we did before, is go to new data set. We'll call it, let's just call it discharge. We don't really need, this can be anything. The parameter itself already has discharge. The parameter is discharge, so in a way you want the label to be more descriptive. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to call it logger, meaning it's coming from a logger. And I'll assign that to discharge. And I won't give it a method yet. In this case, it's instantaneous data. It's also every hour, so I'll make it 61, and then I'll click Save. So now we have our discharge data set. Let's go back to Aquarius. Now I'm going to make an adjustment once again to the query so it's not just pulling back the last 7 days of data. So let's go and adjust that query to comment out the last 7 days. There it is. I'll put a comment there. I will save it. Now we need to create a new data set rule. So it will take that discharge data from that query and put it into the right place within Aquarius. So now I'm going to add a data set rule here. You see, here's the one that we already have configured for water level. We can get the details by clicking on it, expanding, seeing the various components of that. I'll reduce it again. Now here's the new one that we've just created. So in this case, if I place this as 2, that is going to be replaced here with a 2, which means this will not be executed. It will replace it with the logic is that the else statement is what's going to be executed because 2 is not equal to 1, so therefore it's discharged. That means this is the query that will be executed. So I'll leave that at 2. I'll type in discharge. Or sorry, yes, that's correct. Discharge. I'll enable it. And now where is that going to go? That data is going to go into Aquarius. We'll use the default profile. We'll enable that. It's going to go to the parameter which is discharge. It has the label logger. It's going to go to the location Gadang. Oops. Let's fix that. We want to be careful with case. And now we'll save that. So once it's saved, you'll see now under the connector for Gadang we have water level and a discharge. And let's review then what we have for the connector before we try to run it. So it's grabbing the data, connecting to the database as specified by this DSN. It's going to be running this query, which will get all of the data. In this case, it's going to run for both water level and discharge for the entire data set. That's okay for this one time. Let's let it do that. It's going to pull the date from the date time column and the value from this column. All right, I think we are ready to run it. Let's just double check. All right. I'm going to click Run Connector. And if we've configured everything correctly, we won't see any errors. It's possible we will see errors, and that will be another learning opportunity. So the time now is 11:16. Yeah. It started running the connector. It's looking at 2 data sets. It's running the first one. Oh, okay, so we do have an error, and it's saying that the table or the view does not exist. So let's have a look at that query. It could be that it was not specified or there's a typo or something like that. So I'm just going to copy that entire query. Aha, I see the problem there already. Now I didn't change the database table correctly, so I'll just change that to Gadam when I copied it. Gadam. let's double check. I'm going to copy that here, and I'm going to, oh, and I've also misplaced the dataset ID piece. So here's the actual query that we want, and it has that token, that AQUARIUS Connect token, which is not part of standard SQL. That's for AQUARIUS Connect. I'm going to copy that, put that in here. Into the GDAM connector. Okay, we'll save that, and let's see if we have better luck when we run it this time. Okay, so this is one of those situations where it's probably a good idea to clear the state because it might be caching some information, and let's just try that and see if there's a different result. I'll reset the state and save, and then I will also go into each of these dataset rules and do the same. Very likely in future versions of AQUARIUS Connect, there won't be the need for this. AQUARIUS Connect is a very new product, and they're improving performance and issues like this in future releases. Okay, well, let's try it again and see if we can get it to run. I'll go back to the connector, click run. If not, we'll troubleshoot it a little bit longer, but the principles are what I've detailed here, and you'll probably be able to figure it out yourself. So we still have the error. Okay, let's have one last look at the actual query itself. So it's not finding the table. Perhaps I've entered the table incorrectly. It's talking about the table. Okay, the issue was that I did not have the case correct in my select statement. I had uppercase here for the table, and in Oracle that doesn't, it's case sensitive. But it is interesting now to show you how that case statement will work when we have that dataset ID. That's what it is normally like with the replacement, but it's going to replace it with 1. So if it is 1, we'll see what this brings back when it queries this database, this table, when it queries table Gedang. So I'm going to run that, and you'll see that it returns a column called value, which is the discharge. Sorry, this is the water level. If I change this to 2 and run this query again, you'll note that these values will change. And now it represents the discharge values, but it still has the same column name. So as far as AQUARIUS Connect is concerned, when it is parsing this data, it is pulling data from the value column. So now I have replaced that query with the version that should work. I will save it. And now let's run the connector once again. Okay, it's looking better. It's parsing 1 and 2, and it's finding 43,000 points in each. That makes sense for the entire period of record, and you see it indicates the range, so starting from the end of 2012. And I'll refresh this. Okay, it looks like it was successful. It exported 43,180 points for the discharge one, which was sensor 2. Remember when we specified that column number? And 1. Just remember, it's the 1 and the 2 that get replaced in that SQL query. So let's go back to Aquarius time series and let's look at what we have for discharge. This is the one that was empty a moment ago, and let's see if it has now received data. And there we go. It is showing data. Let's go to the very end of the data set. We'll see, looks like the last data in this, oh, that's data gaps. I want to be in the time series grid. I'll go right to the very bottom and see that October 11th at 6 p.m. And there's the data. So that in a nutshell is very quickly how one would go about configuring Aquarius Connect. Let's double check that this is on a schedule now because we want this to be automated. And I do have it running at that hourly schedule that we specified. So as you go through configuring your own locations, you will need to do a repetition for the most part of what you've seen here. You may be able to speed things up a little bit by creating some profiles for some of these rules, so that will allow you to have some preset settings. Please do read through that information on profiles in the quick start guide and throughout. There's much information here that will make what I've tried to demonstrate much more clear for you.